Okay, so I'm going to introduce the committee. To my far left is Dan Sove, committee member. Beside him is Doreen Lester, another committee member. Corinne, what are you, assistant planner? Senior planner, sorry. To my far right is Matthew Child, committee member. Beside him is Bill Baker, co-chair and committee member. And Sarah Gerard is our planning clerk. And in the back is Ian Rollins, junior planner, and Lori Chadwick, the director of development services. I'm Phil Pocock, I'm the chair. And first we are going to do the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the land acknowledgement, we acknowledge that this land is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi people, and of the Huron-Wendat peoples. We value their significant historical and contemporary contributions of the local and regional First Nations and all of the original peoples of Turtle Island who have been living and working on this land from time immemorial.
Any declaration of conflict of interest? Not seeing any. I'm going to move on to the adoption of the published agenda. Moved by Bill, seconded by Doreen. All in favor? Passed. Now we come to the adoption of November 21st meeting. Bill?
I'd like to make an amendment to move the minutes, as we don't have a copy at the moment to review.
Okay.
Move them to January 16th.
Okay, seconder. Doreen? All in favor? Okay, we'll move to the minutes. And now we'll move to the application for Paul Ledoux at 373 Queen Street.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so the first application is dealing with property address 373, and that's Queen Street in Harrow. That's identified here on the screen, outlined in yellow. It is officially designated in the official plan highway commercial, and the zoning category for this property is actual commercial district 3.1. So as you notice here, there is a house on the property with an accessory structure and a pool structure. And this house was in existence prior to the recent zoning bylaw. So therefore, the house structure is considered existing and it's legal non-conforming. So it does not currently conform to the zoning bylaw, but it is acceptable because it was existing prior to the zoning bylaw coming into place. We do have the owner with us today. His name is Mr. Paul Ledoux. And a couple things to point out on the screen here. I just want to show you this block area is zoned commercial because this is the block that goes all the way up to the mill, actually, and then it goes into the area of Harrow. So that's why it's actually now zoned commercial and designated commercial. But these lands can operate as legal non-conforming for residential as long as any changes to this property come through for the Committee of Adjustment for any changes in use or size of the existing residential use. Next slide, please. These site photos here just give you a little bit of a walk around of the property. What you're seeing here in the top left corner is the Ledoux property with the adjacent neighbor next door. You can see that they're Century homes. And then walking through to the backyard is the top right-hand corner. And then around the block is Delta Street. And just looking down there, you can see the very back of the property, which Sarah is pointing out. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the application that we're looking at today is to legalize an existing deck. You can see that here in the site plan. You can see the pool area, and then to the north of the pool, up on the top right-hand corner, is an existing deck. The deck has been there for some time. The applicant has identified that deck as being there for over 30 years. And here are the measurements of the deck itself. It's 2 feet high, it's 24 feet in width, and it's 30 feet in length. And it abuts the actual property lines, and you can see that in the site plan. Next slide, please. Our current zoning bylaw, 1037, identifies that we do allow some encroachments of structures into the required yards. And I'm just going to read this. A deck having a floor height of greater than 1 foot and less than 4 feet above the ground can encroach into any yard, but to a maximum depth of 6.5 feet into a required front or rear yard. It further states, and not within 10 feet of a front lot line or 4 feet from a side or a rear lot line. And the part of a deck located within a required rear yard shall have a maximum width of 12 feet. So if you go to the next slide, I'll show you a drawing that basically explains this better. So if you look at that drawing here, the black lines indicate all of the required yards in accordance with today's zoning bylaw. What I've shown here, though, is there's a red line right through the pool. Great. And that shows what we do allow a little bit of encroachment on. But what you can see there highlighted in red or orange is actually where the location of the deck is. And I'll talk about that more in the next slide. So here in the photos, it's just a walk around of the rear yard and what you're looking at for the deck. You can see that the fence and the deck are one that abut each other. And it goes right around the top side of the pool area. So just scan through those photos just to get a familiarity with what it looks like. And you can see that there is a security fence, a chain link fence around the pool area, and that's for safety reasons. Okay. And then next slide, just a couple more pictures, just to show that Mr. Ledoux has advised us that there has been some maintenance that has been performed on this deck over the years. The latest ones being about 5 to 6 years ago. And you can see just a couple of the joists underneath that have been replaced, and some of the deck boards on top have been replaced over time as well. Next slide, please. Okay, these pictures just show a little bit of the neighboring property. And again, one of the things that we do when we're looking at applications for minor variances, we do look at the impacts from neighboring properties. So just some vantage points there as well. And one thing to note, if Sarah, you can go back one slide actually. In some of these pictures, you can also look at the vantage points from any of the side neighbors as well. So there is a garage that's in between the two houses. You can see that from where the house is located. Okay, next slide. So whenever we look at a minor variance application, we have to go through the 4 tests of that are written in the Planning Act. And the first one is it compliant with the intent of the official plan? Accessory uses, pools and decks are permitted. As I mentioned, that this is a legal non-conforming residential use, and accessory uses are allowed with that. This has been an existing pool and deck for some time. But any changes to the main or accessory uses would require any applicant to come through the Committee of Adjustment for any adjustments to that. We are not looking at an adjustment to it. It's already there. So that's why it states that their recommendation is that it complies. The next item, intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained. Encroachment permitted into required yard. I've just listed these. So the zoning bylaw states that you can have a 6.5 foot encroachment, but not within that 4 foot rear yard. This is asking for full relief from that item. And we're stating that's a conflict. No encroachment, it states, can be permitted in the required side yard. So it's asking for 4 feet of relief again. And that's, we've stated as a conflict. The deck width permitted in the encroached required yard, it allows for 12 feet of width. This is outside of that allowable encroachment area. So again, we're stating it's a conflict. And then number 3, is it proposed to be minor? When we did our assessment, it does not attempt to meet the zoning bylaw provisions at this point, and it does not try to mitigate privacy issues that have been raised. So we're stating that that's a conflict. It is also a large property with some depth. And is there a possibility that the applicant could perhaps make mitigation or change it or allow a deck to be located somewhere where it could satisfy the zoning bylaw. So again, a conflict. And the existing deck is constructed at 0 setbacks, which I've mentioned. Number 4 on the 4 test, it states, is the proposal appropriate and desirable for this land use? It is a legal conforming property. However, it's been there for some time. And what I've stated here is that we do typically allow decks around pools for accessibility. We do allow pool decks to be as an accessory use and to residential main uses. So we've stated that this complies. So what we have here is just a synopsis of the fact that we have 2 of the 4 tests that can be satisfied and 2 that are in conflict. Next slide, please. Our official plan has 2 additional items that we have for tests for minor variances. And these 2 items, we have stated that they are in compliance of. One of them being, is it compatible with the character of the neighborhood? This item has been there for some time, so there's really no change to the character of the neighborhood. And then the circumstances are particular to the site. The owner wishes to keep a deck that has been constructed some time ago and not lose the investment that he did with the repairs. So this is something that we would typically see at the Committee of Adjustment, that somebody wants a little bit of relief from, but in this case, unfortunately, it does not satisfy all of the tests of the minor variance. Next slide, please. Upon circulation of this application, we received a comment from the Essex Region Conservation Authority, and they stated they had no objection. We did receive 2 comments from the public upon our circulation, and Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'd like to read those out. Okay, so the first piece of correspondence that we received is from Greg Jolicoeur, and it is from the residents of 405 Queen Street. And it states, in regard to this application, we would like to express our opposition to this application for variance. Myself and our neighbors have worked successfully with the town to adhere to the local building bylaws. In some cases, we have made sacrifices to our plans in order to be in compliance. Mr. Ledoux has built his structure without apparent awareness of existing bylaws and built right up to the neighbor's lot line. It appears also that some of the structure above the ground extends even further over the property lines of the adjoining neighboring property. This expansion encroaches on the view, is unsightly, and compromises the ability for people to maintain their properties up to their own limits because these existing structures abut the neighbors' properties. We would respectfully ask that Mr. Ledoux be held to the same standards as everyone else in this particular regard, and that's for Greg and Linda Jolicoeur. And the next one is from Rick Ludlow, and it is the same language in the document. And I'll just note that Mr. Rick Ludlow is at 381 Queen Street in Harrow. So moving on, we did not receive any other comments internally or externally from any other of the circulations. And we'll move on to the next slide. And lastly, the decision of the committee, you have 3 options. You can approve with or without conditions. They must be deemed reasonable or attainable. You can defer the application pending more additional information if you feel it's necessary. And lastly, you can deny the application, and you do need to state the reasons why. Okay, at this point, we do have Mr. Paul Ledoux to answer any questions, Mr. Chair, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Mr. Ledoux, would you like to?
Not really. The only thing that I thought seemed weird was that the deck says it's 12 feet wide, which it's 12 feet at the corner, but it's more like 8 feet and 6 feet following the contour. So it's not 12 feet. Other than that, no.
Anyone from the committee have any questions?
Mr. Chair, thank you. So I guess the question is to administration, just for some understanding clarity. and maybe Mr. Luna can answer as well. Is the property behind to the west, is it a vacant property and is it a different ownership?
Here, if, actually, Sarah, don't worry about it. I was going to ask you if you could bring up the screen again, but what I'll just explain is that we have 3 abutting properties. The one that looked like it was behind a garage, if that one's the one that you're referring to, that is part of the neighboring site. And then behind it, it is another residential lot to the west. And then to the south side, that is a vacant parking lot that's part of Danielle's restaurant.
Sure.
I'm gonna let,
Sorry.
Chair, the question I would have is, when was last survey done, or has there been a survey done to show the property line to the north? Mainly.
Lou, can you answer that?
Tell there was a survey done when I first bought the house, but the deck is the fence that's encroaching on the other lot line. It's not that it's encroaching per se, it's that the posts are 15 inches or so wide. And when I built the fence with the other neighbor, we both decided to put it there. And the only reason it and part of it actually is more on my side because we had to go around a tree at the very back corner. But other than that, it's on the lot line and half of it's on his, half of it's on mine.
Do you have any, Bill, any question?
Formulate my question here because I'm trying to understand here. Would be permitted to pull up the slide again with the areas that do not comply? I just want to kind of review that, if I may. Because I'm trying to understand in terms of the 2 areas that do not comply. If you pull that slide that shows. No, actually, I want the slide that explains what doesn't comply in terms of the zoning bylaw. There you go. Thank you. So what we're trying to look at here is relief of 50% from the deck that approaches the, which yard is that? Is that the backyard or is that the side yard? The one that is 12, that is actually requires, it needs relief for 12 feet, does it?
Here. So item number 2 there. So the first one is that it is, nothing is allowed within 4 feet of the rear yard. So it would be relief for 4 feet to allow that to exist. The next one is the side yard. Side yard says no encroachment is permitted within the side yard. So they would be asking for 4 feet again, full relief on the side yard.
And then the last one, which the deck's permitted encroachment requires, required yard is 12 feet. Relief request is 24 feet. Which is that? That is the side yard or front?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sarah, would you mind putting up that that diagram that yeah, okay. So this is the best diagram to look at. Our area that shows the red line right there, that is the only area that we allow any encroachment legally into. And if you had a deck, you could only be of a width of 12 feet wide within that area. Anything outside of that area, you would need full relief from the Committee of Adjustment for, and it is completely abutting the property line. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I guess the reason I'm asking my questions on that particular piece is that it seems to be significant that if we did not allow this, that he'd have to reconstruct that whole back area that has been there for, I'm suggesting, I guess, 20 years, 25 years. And this is the first time we've heard about this. So I guess, is there any, I guess our only position is to to approve or deny this completely. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
For you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering of the two neighbors that provided comments regarding this application, are they of two abutting neighbors?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Mr. Rick Ludlow is the direct adjacent neighbor on the side lot line. And then the one previously is across the street from Delta. So it's the abutting corner lot. So not directly abutting.
They're during.
Sorry, again, through you, Mr. Chair. So the Rick, the neighbor that's beside you, does the pool actually abut that property? It does. Okay, thank you.
Any more? Oh, Matthew.
Good discussion. I think some of my questions have been answered, but I just want to make sure if we could go back to the photo that shows the air photo, Sarah, with the mock-up. So the deck extends to the north property line. It doesn't extend to the west property line, but it does encroach. Is that correct? Right. My question is, what's the consequence if the committee goes with the staff recommendation tonight? What's the consequence? What's the fate of the structure, if any? You could just elaborate on that.
Chair. So if the committee denies the application today, we would, our building department would be approaching Mr. Ledoux and stating that the structure is non-compliant with the zoning bylaw of today. One of the things that we did correspond with Mr. Ledoux over the last amount of time was we stated, if you are able to provide the committee or the town with any evidence showing that this deck was in existence prior to our zoning bylaw current, and then also the previous zoning bylaw, which is for the town of Harrow. And the town of Harrow, the zoning bylaw for the town of Harrow came in 1986. So there's obviously a challenge of finding evidence that would be presented prior to that. So we asked for photographic information or anything like that that would show that it was existing prior to 1986. Unfortunately, the applicant could not provide that evidence. So we do have to look at this proposal under today's zoning bylaw. And unfortunately, it is not compliant. Therefore, the building department would ask that it be corrected. So this structure would unfortunately have to be removed. The pool is allowed to have a deck 1 foot in height throughout the property. Nothing should be abutting the fence line as it is, but there are some options. And the pool is only, I think, about a foot and a half to 2 feet maybe above grade, and Mr. Ledoux would be able to answer that for you. Thank you. Just use your mic.
Same height as the deck, which is around 17 inches on average. There's a little bit of a wave to the ground.
Else has a question? Oh, Dan, that's.
Chair, my question is what triggered the application? What was you doing in order to get to this point?
Well, all I can say is about 2 years ago, the neighbor asked if I would build a fence. He wanted a privacy fence. He said he would buy the materials and that I would do the labor. And I said, I don't have time for that. And I said, you're welcome to do whatever you want, but I've already put enough time in this. And then he started being mean with me. And one day I got this.
There Any other question from the committee? Anyone from the, oh, go ahead.
To the applicant, it looks as though the east and south side of the pool could accommodate a deck if necessary. There is room on your property. Would you agree with that?
The opposite side,
Thank you.
benefits of having it there is that that area, when I first moved there, was all weeds growing through the deck and it was all falling apart. And it just is an unsightly corner to take care of. And so that's why I kept it like that.
Anyone from the public who wants to make a comment? To Mr. Ledoux from me, is it possible to move that desk, just swing it around the pool? Is it, because it's, to me, it's kind of confusing that you're coming to the committee after the fact, after 30 years. So I don't understand, like, as Mr. Sauve said, why is this here now, right? And you're talking about a fence that to me is a little bit weird, but I just just curious about that, if that deck could be moved around.
That would cause a nervous breakdown for me. The columns that are the fence are going down 4 feet into the ground. And they're all bolted into the concrete. What that would involve if I had to do that would be pulling all of that out of the ground, because without a deck there, all of a sudden the columns have this whole bare area that's all covered by decking on the side. But once that would be gone, I would have sonotubes coming out of the ground 17 inches, 20 to 20 inches. And then above that is when the columns start when the detail of the column works. So there would be no alternative other than to tear all those columns out, which each one of them is 7 feet plus 2 feet of concrete plus 4 feet going underground. It'd be a nightmare for me.
Okay. Bill?
I guess what I was about to ask is if we had the ability to put a condition on it, that if we approve this application and we put a condition on that, it is reconstructed so that the deck is not in the area. I'm having it hard to believe. I visited the site and you have 4 of the pillars that are attached to the deck. There's 4 pillars that are attached to the deck area. Yeah. So I guess what you're saying is that you don't have any ability to reconstruct that deck, but yet if we deny this, you're going to be forced to do it anyways. So I guess we're trying to come up, in my mind, we're trying to, I think, come up with a remedy for you and to participate in this would be my opinion. So I would move the application, if permitted, if the time's right, to approve with the condition of reconstructing that deck to the other side. That would be my motion.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Committee of Adjustment here today is making a decision on an application to either approve and accept the deck as it currently exists, or deny the application as presented. Okay. So if you deny the application as presented, then the applicant would have to talk with the building department in order to become compliant with the zoning bylaw. And that there would actually be the trigger mechanism for him to maybe reconstruct the deck on the opposite side. Hopefully. Thank you.
Motion?
Deny based on the lack of quiet enjoyment for the neighbor on the abutting property.
Seconder. Seconded. Sorry. All, did I say it? Did I do it? All in favor of denying the motion? Application. All right, all opposed? Motion denied. Or application denied. You're free to go there, Mr. Ledoux. Sorry. Okay, now we're gonna move on to application A 28-23, First Step Daycare, 169 Irwin Avenue in Essex Center.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just as I get set up here. Okay, so the next application is A 2823, and it's a minor variance application for the property identified as 169 Irwin Avenue, and that's located in Essex Center. And the official plan designation for this property is Town Center, and the zoning category for this property is Commercial District 2.2. And the proposal is to construct a two-story addition to the existing daycare building that has a footprint of 3,066 square feet in size. Now, the addition is proposed to match the existing building setback, which is existing at 5.57 feet from the exterior lot line. So in the next application, or slide, I'm sorry, you'll see the site plan that was prepared by ADA Architects, and we have Mr. Jason Tiber, who is with us today, and he's the architect that's working on this file for the owners of First Steps Daycare. And what you can see here is actually the arrows pointing to the area that is asking for relief. And you'll see that it is running with the running line of the existing structure, and to the closest point there, it is replicating. This application is also going through for site plan control, so we'll be dealing with the site plan control issues at a later date with regards to parking, stormwater, and so forth. So the only thing that we are looking at today from the Committee of Adjustment is to just look at the relief that we're asking for in this case. Next slide, please. So in our zoning bylaw, the minor variance section that applies here is section 10.11. And it states that you have to have 40 feet on a lot abutting Talbot Street, Maidstone Avenue, Fairview Avenue, and so on. But I have highlighted here Gosfield Town Line. So Gosfield Town Line is a connecting link from the Arner Town Line, County Road 23, and it does feed through Essex Center. And this is the reason for, this is a typical type of setback that we have along county roads and connecting links through the town of Essex. Next slide, please. So in these pictures here, you can see the existing structure, and you can see the setback that's already there from the roadway. And this is a wide roadway corridor, and you can also see the sidewalks there and so forth. And you can see where it does lie on a corner lot, which is irregular in shape. It's actually a pie shape or triangular shape. So this issue is that it restricts any kind of future development on this property because of this lot layout. Very unique. Next slide, please. Just some more shots of the existing structure. And next slide. And there's a full picture of the existing daycare facility. Next slide. So when considering our 4 tests from the Planning Act, we're looking at the intent of the official plan. It is zoned for institutional uses that are permitted within the town center area, and it accounts for redevelopment of an existing structure. We found that under our analysis, it does comply with the official plan policies. In number 2, it states, is that the intent of the zoning bylaw is still maintained. We didn't find any impacts to traffic or neighborhood characteristics in this case. And because it is also subject to site plan control, we will ensure that the development satisfies all provisions. Next is the proposal is considered minor. We found again that it does not encroach on any sight lines, doesn't cause any major traffic issues or anything dealing with the setbacks. It would be replicating what's existing. So again, complies. Number 4, is the proposal appropriate and desirable for land use? It is supporting a well-known established business in our community, and Essex is growing. So we did look at this as desirable, that they are willing to work out through site plan control any concerns with regards to parking and so forth. And also the configuration of this we did offer our support because they are looking at their entrances off of Irwin Avenue. So this layout really does satisfy a lot of items with regards to traffic volume and the flow of traffic in and out of the building. Next slide, please. Again, the last 2 tests were from our official plan. Just noting again, property is unique, irregular shaped, flanked by residential and a commercial plaza. So we really do have to look at this as a site-specific situation. And it does not impact this setback because it's already existing. And further, it does not encroach actually into the road right of way. So it complies. Next slide, please. Upon circulation, we found that we did not receive any comments from the public. IRCA did write in that they had no objections to this proposal, and Development Services did send us 1 comment, and they were stating that they are requesting a 6-meter wide strip of land along Irwin Avenue to be conveyed for road widening purposes, because Irwin Avenue will be having some road work done to it very soon. And this will accommodate for utilities, for drainage, for sewers, and different things with the road reconstruction at that location. Next slide, please. Here are the conditions that were brought forward with regards to the top one, dealing with infrastructure services, asking for the 6-meter wide parcel. And then there was also another recommendation that came in stipulating that because this is a daycare, can we consider having the owner install bollards, safety bollards, in front of any habitable room? So because we're looking at keeping the existing setback, it would be a good idea to have the safety feature in place. And I thank the person that brought this forward because I think it's a really good idea, and we are supporting that recommendation. Next slide, please. So here's a look at the area would be conveyed to the town, and the applicants are accepting of this. And next slide. Here is the existing bollards in front of the daycare right there. And then what is being proposed is to extend the bollards along Gosfield Town Line Road, not necessarily that many, but along any weakness points along the building, such as windows. Okay, and last slide. And again, just a reminder of what the committee can rule on here today. And at this point, just to note that Mr. Jason Tiber is with us today from ADA Architects, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Ms. Shirk or Mr. Tiber, would you like to add any comments? Questions from the committee? Not seeing any. Oh, sorry, Matthew.
To staff, and thanks for the information core, and I agree with the addition of the bollards at some of the weak points. That was something I know at least a couple of my kids stayed at your daycare all those years ago, and I know the family was pleased to see those go in. My only amendment to the recommendation to include bollards along Gosfield is that bollards be considered through the site plan process in the parking area as well. Because, we read about a couple times a year, someone thinking their car's in park and it's not, and it, goes through a window. And I think in terms of that sort of low likelihood, high consequence event, that would be prudent. So that would be my suggested amendment to that recommendation. And I'm more than happy to move the motion with that amendment at the appropriate time if it's helpful, Mr. Chair.
I mean that is there any other questions? Not seeing anything. So go ahead there, Matthew.
I'll move the motion with the adjustment that the bollards be considered through the site plan process for any sort of, glassed areas on the parking, the west side of the, addition as well.
Seconder? Doreen? All in favor? Motion passed. Application's good. Thank you. Okay. And now we'll move on to. Now we're gonna move on to application B 2923. At 33 or 333 Victoria Ave, Essex. Go ahead, Corinne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you stated, the property address, 333 Victoria Avenue, and that's in Essex Center. The official plan designation for this property is residential, and the zoning category is residential 1.1. The subject lot that we're viewing here on the screen is the green area and the blue area together. And what we're looking at is the severance for the purple area, the blue area only. So it's a small lot addition that would be added to the neighboring property at 323 Victoria Avenue. And just noting on the slide, these are the dimensions of the property. You can see the subject lot and the retained lot square footage as well. Next slide, please. And just noting that the owners are also here to join us today, Mr. Chair, Lionel and Lori Cosette. In the next slide, we're just showing the site plan that was submitted, as well as a street view of the property. In the next slide, we'll show you some more pictures. And the top is just showing the neighboring sites on either side. The depth of the property, it's quite deep in length, and it's irregular. It actually curls in the back in an L-shaped form, and you can see it's vacant. Okay, so no existing structure on that property at all. Next slide, please. So when reviewing consent applications, in this case, a addition, we look for the review of these policy documents. So we look at the provincial policy statement, and the provincial policy statement is supported in this case as it promotes efficient development and land use patterns for the well-being of the municipality over the long term. The next one is the county official plan. And the county official plan, although it has delegated authority to the lower tier, it does support consents in the residential areas, such as infills. This is located within the Essex settlement area that permits lot adjustments, so it complies. The next one is the Town of Essex official plan. And we didn't find that there would be any impacts to the existing adjacent properties or any future developments on this property because it has enough width to it and depth. It's currently an irregular lot, but there's going to be no change to that point, and it keeps a linear shape at the front view. Lot additions permitted to be consolidated are with the adjacent property at 323 Victoria Avenue. And the next thing is that we make sure that it is compliant with the zoning bylaw. And we're stating that because there's no relief being requested here, there is no building that's being proposed at this time, but it still has enough of a building envelope on that property. So it abides by all zoning regulations. Next slide, please. Upon circulation of this application, we received one comment from the Conservation Authority stating that there was no objections, but a clearance may be necessary. The public notice, we didn't receive any other comments from the public. Infrastructure Services did provide us with some comments though, and I'd like to read these out. There may be existing services for either water, sanitary, storm on this property. This should be investigated in advance of finalizing the consent to determine if they exist. If services are found, then those services should be abandoned. The next one states that if the owner at 323 Victoria Avenue has constructed an illegal second gravel driveway in the Town of Essex right-of-way, and they're suggesting that in advance of any severance being finalized, This granular material should be removed and reinstated with topsoil and sod. And lastly, it states a landscape barrier of 3 meters of grass behind the new multi-use trail that's supposed to be going along Victoria. It is recommended as a condition of approval that they have a grassed buffer area. Next slide, I'll show that to you. So here's just a view of the front. You can see that there is no curb cut for this second driveway at the top. Okay. The owners did provide information that they were utilizing this just simply to back up long trailers to the rear of the property there. You can see where the truck is parked. So they just needed a bit of a straight backup route in order to get those trailers in. And that's why they did this some time ago. They did approach council some years back asking if they could legitimize or legalize the second access. But as the committee does know, we only permit one access per lot. And if they want a second access, they do have to have council approval. And in this case, they stated that they are not looking to legalize the second entrance. They do want to keep some of the gravel area though. Okay. So in the next slide, I can show you what infrastructure services is looking for. So at the bottom there in the black line, that would be where the new multi-use trail down Victoria will be located. So picture that as pavement. And then what they're asking for is, could we have a landscape buffer, which is just simply grass? Okay. And the reason for that is in order for us to have accessible a multi-use trail, we want to make sure that it's clear of any debris. So anytime that you have driveways that cross it that are crushed stone, for instance, it can kick up that debris and interfere with anybody that would use a mobility device, for instance. In this case, I've corresponded with the applicants and asked them that they do wish to keep some of the gravel area just because any cars parked on the cement at the back, they don't want the oil dripping. So it's nice to have a little bit of that gravel area for a parking spot. And lastly, next slide. So what we provided today is just a list of the typical conditions that's in black here showing on the screen. And the ones that are highlighted in red are what we've just spoken on. Abandon the dual services or any services that are were identified as a concern from infrastructure services. And we can deal with the applicants on that through the 2-year time period. And then the other one is the removal of topsoil and sod and to remove the gravel area. And lastly, there is a bell easement along the property. One of the suggestions that we would state is that just to revisit that bell easement, just to make sure that it doesn't need any updates to its legal description. And lastly, the last slide. And at this point in time, we do have the Cossettes here. And I understand that Lori may wish to speak, and I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Seth, do you have anything to add to Corinne's application?
Just wondered if, like, what is the depth that you want that grassy area? Like the walking trail is what? Is that 8 feet? Or like from the curb, and then how much grass would you want? And when would that need to be done? Because if we put sod and grass in there and then they come and do the walking trail, it's not gonna all wreck all our dirt and sod that we put in there. That's gonna be right next to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what we would do at this point is we would get some dimensions from infrastructure services because this was just brought to us today about this item. So we would talk with them and we would find the dimensions for the multi-use trail and then what would be an adequate amount of grassed buffer area. They are suggesting it be 3 meters in depth. And that would still provide you with some gravel area, but that you do have 2 years to satisfy any of these conditions after approval from the committee if they so choose. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything more? Or are you good? Okay. Any questions from the committee? Dan?
Can you just bring up that aerial view of the severance? Yep, right there.
Also have a question or? Anyone from the audience? Looking for a motion? By Bill, seconder. Doreen, all in favor of the application? All in favor, motion passed. Application, we're gonna take a 5-minute recess so Mr. Kasek can exit the room. And we'll be back in a second. Okay, we're gonna move on to application B 2523 and A 2523. 4020 Smith Road. Corinne?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So the property that we're showing here on the screen is property address 4020 Smith Road. The property is designated as agricultural and zoned agricultural. For the green area, just letting you know that that is the surplus lot that we are proposing to consider a severance for today. And it's 5.67 acres in size. And the retained lot that's showing in blue is going to be 16.95 acres in size. We do have the owner, Ms. Helgrit Hepner, joining us today. And we also have her agent with her is Dan Inverarity. I hope I said that right. So they wish to sever these farmlands in order to consolidate with another farming operation. So they're working together with a purchaser for the blue area that's shown on the screen. And the buyers have identified in the application package that they've submitted a purchase agreement. And they've also filled out a farm lot consolidation form in order to meet the criteria of the PPS with regards to a surplus dwelling severance. Next slide, please. So here is the survey information that was submitted to us. You can see here just a couple things to point out that there is some existing buildings and structures on the property. There is a home and a couple of outbuildings. And Ms. Hepner has horses that she raises on her farm. And that's why she wishes to have a little bit of an atypical sized farm lot severance here. And the reason is to keep those exterior outbuildings. And our official plan does allow consideration to the Committee of Adjustment to ensure that there is any outbuildings that want to be retained with the actual farm residents. And that's what we're looking at in this case. There's also a little bit of room there just to make sure that there's some room for the horses. Our official plan and our zoning bylaw also state that a property, in order to have horses, you have to have a certain amount of size to the property. Ms. Helgret is looking, Ms. Hepner is looking for 5 acres. She has 3 horses. So this will satisfy those concerns. Next slide, please. Okay. So in this picture here, you can see Ms. Hepner's property where she lives at. Okay, so the top corner is the house, and the bottom corner properties, you can see the accessory structures. In the next slides, you can see the retained property. On that top picture there, you can see where the access to the farm is, so there's no need for any kind of access culvert. Next slide, please. When considering a consent application, we do run it through the policy review of the provincial policy statement. It does meet the requirements and criteria for the PPS. The county official plan also supports surplus lots and but designates the authority to the lower tier planning authority, so this complies. And the next item is the Town of Essex official plan. The official plan states that it needs to be a habitable structure, which it is, that it maintains the correct amount of frontage, which it does. It has adequate services. It has a septic, a private septic system. However, because of the requirements of the Town of Essex official plan, it does need to be inspected to make sure that it is habitable. So there will be a septic inspection that will need to occur. There is confirmation of access to the retained and the severed surplus lot. And there will also be a restrictive condition that needs to be applied to the farmlands to ensure that no future dwellings will be erected on the retained lands. And lastly, does it comply with the zoning bylaw? This severance will not interfere with any of the setbacks, and there is no change in land use being proposed here. And the vacant farmland will be consolidated with another farming operation, which is the requirement. Next slide, please. Anytime that you do a surplus dwelling, it is typical that you would need to follow up with a minor variance application that recognizes the reduction in the minimum lot area. So as it states here, it'll be reduced from 22 and change acres to 16.95 acres, and the severed surplus lot will be 5.67 acres in size. Next slide, please. And running through the 4 tests of a minor variance, we found that there was no conflict to any of these, as noted in the planning comments. So it meets all the criteria for a surplus dwelling in these items that are listed here. Next slide, please. When circulating, we did not find any objection from the public or from internal departments. And we did receive some comments from IRCA, and they basically stated that the drains that are around this property are regulated, and any development near them would require a permit. The next slide, please. Conditions of consent are typical in this case. The only one that would stand out unique is the septic system needs to be reviewed. Next slide, please. And this concludes my presentation for today. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair. And we do have Ms. Hepner here to speak on anything that the committee has questions for. Thank you.
Ms. Hepner, do you have anything to add to the comment? I didn't think. Okay. 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 Any questions from the committee? Not. Oh, Matthew?
Two questions. The application, if I can toggle to it successfully here. And I'm on page 49 of 72 for anyone who has that in front of them. The application Forgive me. I'll get to it momentarily. So the application, farm split is selected, not surplus dwelling. So through you, staff, could you clarify which this is?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Matthew, for bringing that up, actually, because I did forget to bring it to the committee's attention. There is one error in the application that was circulated that we did not catch. I do apologize for that. It is actually a surplus dwelling application. So if we could just acknowledge that what we are making a decision on today is for a surplus lot and not a farm split. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I may, my second question. And it's to the applicant or their representative. Do you own other agricultural properties nearby? Okay. 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 Okay, so what's tripping me up here is, and I'm actually just gonna go directly to the town's official plan here. And if you go down to consents, section 6.5A, surplus dwellings, it reads, where a lot has been acquired for consolidation with another farm operation, and there is a dwelling on the acquired lot, a consent may be granted to permit a farmer to sever the dwelling and the surrounding portion of the acquired lot, ... That is, there's a sequencing of events where someone engaged in the practice of agriculture owns agricultural property. They acquire a second agricultural property that has a dwelling on it, and they by right can sever one of those homes. In this case, that test is not satisfied. So I'm concerned that the test that it's consistent with the OP. In fact, I believe that the test that the OP has to be satisfied isn't satisfied in this case. So that's my sort of challenge. Can you help me understand that better? Or
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and great question. The town of Essex does permit or gives consideration for purchasers and buyers to work in tandem. So they work together on the application. So what we have seen in the past is you have to engage with a buyer, submit a purchase agreement, and we have to ensure that that farm consolidation form is filled out stating that the buyer meets the criteria for having the agricultural lands that they would purchase this to consolidate with. The town of Essex does provide consideration for this. I'm not sure of other municipalities, but we do allow them to work in tandem because it's going to be transferred. So in these cases, it would be if Ms. Hepner had to work with the official plan the way it is stated, she would actually sell the whole entire parcel to the buyer, and then the buyer would go through the process to sever it, and then she'd have to purchase her surplus lot back. So what the town does for consideration of that instead is to streamline that system in order to make it all one step, one application, and it helps the basically the public that wants to get out of the farming operation and downsize, but it also supports that consolidation, provided that there is the proof to do so. So this is a purchase that is pending the approval of this application. So if this gets denied, for instance, then it would be the deal would not go through. Okay, so we've looked at these before, and this really is a consideration that the town of Essex does just to streamline that system instead of the property having to flip from one back to them, you know what I mean, and through the legal process. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question.
Go with Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So back to administration. So what we're doing is we're giving consideration on this for the purpose of a farm purchase from another operation. Do we need to put this in the conditions, and are they already setting conditions on closing that should closing not go through, that this application would revert, the whole application would be denied or it wouldn't go through? How do we catch this when excuse me, when we don't have a closing, when there's a closing issue and it doesn't close for whatever reason? How do we catch this? Because if not, we're creating this mechanism for everybody to advance. So, I mean, it's, the idea is understandable, but how do we catch it in terms of our applications?
So, Mr. Chair, in this case, if the seller were to back out, for instance, then the purchase agreement itself would be no longer a component of the application. And we would not be able to finalize that application then. So she's got 2 years for this proposal to go through because we do look at it as a joint application, okay, between the purchaser and the owner. Okay, thank you.
To the applicant or their agent. I notice there's a for sale sign on the property, and you can access the ad, you know, the properties is for sale. So that seems inconsistent with this purchase agreement model. So can someone help me understand that?
And you have to go through me. So, okay, hold on. Are you good with Matthew? Yeah, okay, so if you wouldn't mind going to a microphone, and thank you.
The purchase and sale has a condition on it. This has to go through. If this doesn't go through, then there's no need for to go move forward on the severance on the property. So whether if for some reason the buyer sitting right there fails to close, or the seller decides not to sell it, which is not going to happen, then the whole thing falls apart. Right? You're not going to proceed unless the sale goes through.
I think the intent of the question was, and correct me if I'm wrong, is why do we have a for sale sign on the property if there's already an agreement in place or a conditional agreement in place?
It's not a firm sale. Once it's a firm sale, then the sold goes up. A sale for sale sign always stays up until all conditions are removed. That's the rules.
And this therefore would then be, because it's a joint application, that would be condition of sale. So should this not go through, they would have to come back to the drawing board on this property. Okay, thank you.
Thing from the public. Oh, Matthew, you got one more?
I appreciate, Corey, your comments about past practice here in the town in terms of working with landowners out of sequence with what the official plan language is, that the net effect at the end of the day could be the same, except there's a series of transactions. If you follow the letter of the OP, there's a series of transactions that have to occur. Each of those has risk associated with it, and not all landowners would go through that stepwise process. So it's a complicated issue. For me, the concern here, and I'm considering this precedent because this is the first time we've seen something like this as a committee. You know, I've just been here a year, as you all know, is this could be open season on if any agricultural landowner in the town is interested in the farm surrounding a home but doesn't want the home, they can use this mechanism. And it's essentially a form of farm split in my view, which is not something that it's not something that's allowed. So that's my concern. I understand the need, and I'm very sympathetic to the need to, you know, in some cases for some applicants to monetize the value of these properties. There are other ways to do that, reverse mortgages, purchase of like lease. There's a number of mechanisms that could be considered. So I've got some challenge with this one, and I won't be supporting the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the comments. With regards to precedent setting, we have passed several severances in this method as jointly with that purchase agreement being the case. We have not had one that has not been completed. So the trend is always that it does follow through, usually very quickly too. The question about farm split, the thing is that when you look at a severance application for a surplus lot, the idea is that the dwelling itself is surplus to the farming operation needs. So are we losing any agricultural lands because of the severance application? Technically, no. There is some area, obviously, that is manicured, but then there is also some area that is still being used for farming. Very typical of a surplus lot. No new residents can be built on the retained property, and we do have a purchaser that is going to show us evidence that it will be consolidated with the farming operation. So at this point in time, it is staff's recommendation that we are comfortable with supporting this application. And it is very, in our case, typical of a surplus lot, accepting of the extra area around the accessory structures. So this is something that we have seen multiple times before. And but I do appreciate that when we read the official plan language, that it is for the owner. But again, I do offer consideration for this joint application. Thank you.
Other questions? I do have one for Corinne. So with the retain, will that get that no building layer on the GIS? Okay, you're nodding yes, okay. All right, so do we have a motion for this application? Dan? Oh, 1 second.
I recommend support through administration's recommendations for the application.
Do I have a seconder? Bill? All right, all in favor? Oh, go ahead there, Bill.
I think we should be on record to note that we have identified this, that the sequence doesn't appear to be in line with the provincial policy. However, given the fact that we've had experience with this and that we've had good experience with this in the past, that this is one of the reasons why we're moving this application. So for that reason, I would support it.
Yes, you can make a comment, Doreen.
It's my understanding through you, Mr. Chair, that each application is heard individually and that precedent is not set by one or previous applications. Am I correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. So everyone, all in favor? We have 2. Motion to deny. We have 2. So I'm motion in favor. Motion application approved. I'm looking for a motion for the minor variance. Dan?
Make the motion based on administration's recommendations be fulfilled.
Bill? All in favor? All opposed? I'm in favor. Oh, sorry. I'm in favor as well. Application passed. Okay. Now we're going to go to new business. And I am going to hand this over to Sarah as we're doing the elections of the chair for 2024.
Hi, thank you. You're very welcome. Have a good evening, guys. So to the committee members, we are going to be starting a new committee in 2024, new committee season in 2024. Per our policy and procedures, we do require a new chair and vice chair. We do require a new chair and vice chair to be voted in every committee season. So therefore, when we start in January, we will be calling for nominations now so that when we start January 16th, we have our chair and vice chair in place. So with that being said, there are ballots in front of you. We do have multiple nominations. And if both those nominations do stand, again, for the chair or vice chair. So I will ask at this time, is there any nominations for the chair of the Committee of Adjustment for 2024? Bill. Is there any other nominations for chair at this time? Okay, can we get a seconder, please, on that motion for Phil Pocock to be the chair? Matthew? Okay, Phil, do you stand?
Yes, I stand.
Okay, congratulations, Phil. You've
Okay.
been a wonderful chair for the 2023 season, and I'm sure you will be fantastic for the 2024. So thank you, everybody. We will be moving forward with the vice chair position for the 2024 season. I would like to call for any nominations at this time.
I'd like to nominate Will or Bill. Bill Baker.
Doreen, are there any other nominations at this time for vice chair? None. Can I get a seconder? Bill? Okay. Bill, do you stand? Congratulations. Again, you were a wonderful vice chair for 2023 and yes, and you will do amazing in 2024. So thank you, everybody, for the nominations and again, for being the chair and vice chair.
I want to thank you guys for your willingness to put up with me as chair again. I do have one thing. Unfortunately, Sarah's going to move on to another department next year. So after 5 years,
Thank you.
well, 5 years when I was on the committee. So thank you for your service. And we'll look forward to whoever the next person is. And now I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Doreen and Dan. Oh,